Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 5. Yes, we made it to day 5. It's finally Friday. You'll be glad to hear, I'm sure. It's the weekend. We can all go out. We can all do stuff. We have to stay out. We can't go in, but you've got to go out. Yeah, you know what I mean. Friday with day 5 of our week-long series of webinars entitled Tidying Up the Tax Year End and Beyond. We've had a busy week. So we've had week 1, we had Build Back Better, where we had Taj Parikh, Chief Economist of the IOD, and Lord Lee of Hurley, talking about how we can build back after the coronavirus pandemic, after Brexit, and how all that relates to EIS and SEIS. Tuesday, day 2, we had ones to watch, the fund managers to watch out for 2021. Wednesday was all about ESG and how that's been affecting EIS and how that you can invest through ESG through these schemes now. And then yesterday was all about the myths and misconceptions of EIS. We busted some of those myths that we quite often hear from advisors and financial planners and you guys out there. So hopefully that was one to pick up as well. They're all available if you didn't watch them on our website, so please do check that out. Go to visa.org.uk and you can watch them all again or watch them all for the first time. Which brings us very neatly to today and Friday. I say this is our last one. We want to save the best till last, so we have our best panelists with our best people on. You can see that obviously from your screen already. So this is all about the companies. So you're going to meet the companies that you invest into. You or your clients hand over your money to fund managers and you get invested in early stage businesses. Great, but what happens next? How do those companies spend your money? How do those companies view you as an investor? And what plans do they have to align their interests with yours? So we're going to hear some real life entrepreneurs. You can see a couple on screen here already. They'll put their hands up in a minute. And you can hear from them as to why your funding is so vital to them, and then how they work with the fund managers that you can also see on your screen at the same time. So you'll have a chance to ask them your questions, so please put them through. You can use the Q&A function and chat function down the bottom there. You're all Zoom veterans by now, you know how it works. But these are real life entrepreneurs. This is what EIS is all about. The whole thing does not work without entrepreneurs, innovators, exciting new businesses to invest into. So this is a really exciting webinar to behold. Okay, so I've spoken as usual for far too long. I've done introductions for us, but you need to meet our panelists. So I'm going to go to Alexander. Do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Alexander Crawford. I'm co-head of investments in Calculus Capital. We are an EISA and VCT fund manager, been in the market doing EIS investments since the late 90s, and pretty proud of what we've done and what we've achieved, the companies we've invested in and the exits we've made.
I feel like we're working in pairs today. So your pair is Simon, your entrepreneur, your buddy is Simon in that sense. So Simon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, and good morning, everybody. I'm Simon Hill. I'm the CEO and founder of a B2B enterprise software company called Wazoku. As you said, buddied and friends, and a portfolio company of Calculus Capital. We've raised about £7 million in mostly EIS money, a chunk of which came through Calculus Capital specifically. Yeah, and happy to answer all and other questions, but nice to meet everybody. Thank you.
Careful what you ask for, Simon. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mark Bennett. I'm one of the 4 partners at Hatch. We are a relatively new EIS fund, been going about 3 years. Invest in purely digital businesses, and alongside 3 of the founders, Scott Weavers-Wright, who's got a background of startups and successful exits, Simon Penson, who's also a startup founder and sold his business Azzle Media, and then one of our co-founder, Fred. So the 4 of us make up Hatch.
We had Fred on Tuesday. He was on the ones to watch fund managers, so he was really useful on that one and had a lot of great stuff to say. And your buddy in that sense is George. So George, over to you. You're in the car.
Yes, sorry about my dial-in option today. I do apologise. My name is George Richardson. I'm 1/14 of a company called Aerocloud. I'm a CEO, and we provide crystal balls by the medium of software to help airport operations staff predict the future and best use their concrete outside the airport. I had a non-typical route into the airport business. I was a former professional racing driver until 2016, and I'm part of Hatch's portfolio, like you said, and very excited to be on this call. Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. And being in a car is no problem. We've had dogs, we've had cats, we've had parrots. Yeah, the car just added to all the mixes, all the fun of Zoom. So Jasper, you're the odd man out here, literally, because you're wearing two hats, I guess.
Yes, I have no fellow entrepreneur with me other than myself, unfortunately. But Jasper Smith, I'm the founder of Vala Capital. Vala is an EIS fund. We run a couple of funds, a sustainability fund, which is doing great, and a generalist fund. The generalist fund is characterized by being run by and supported by a group of entrepreneurs, and we invest in a pretty wide range of tech and engineering and food and beverage type businesses. So it's a pretty wide mix, and we deploy our entrepreneurs into those businesses, and help them curate the journey through from the first time we invest through to exits and and greater growth.
Sure. And obviously we had Max on Wednesday, I think, talking about ESG, and he talked about the Vala Fund there. So
Great.
We are well informed on that. So let's start from the top. It's probably, and I know talking to George and Simon with the introductions kind of give a bit of a background as to the business and how they work. But guys, do you want to talk a little bit more about the business, kind of the background, how it came to be, how the funding, just kind of set the scene for us a little bit. Simon, do you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely. So as I said, we're an enterprise, B2B enterprise software company. We built effectively a new market segment from the ground up, which finally, after about 8-9 years of work, is starting to be recognized as the next pillar of enterprise tech. And we help global Fortune 2000 organizations to connect the dots between the business problems, the innovation needs that they have, and their audiences, their employees, their suppliers, their customers, and recently, following an acquisition, a open innovation on-demand marketplace of about 500,000 external innovators as well, who can come together to solve innovation challenges and drive business value for organizations, right? That's a mix of how do businesses solve problems of today and innovate their current business model, and how do they invent the future products and services that they have going forward. We are about 60 people as a business. As I said, we're about 9 years old now, and operate globally within Fortune 2000 companies, both inside and outside those organizations. In terms of as I said, we've only really raised EIS money. For me, that was a strategic choice that we made right at the start of starting the company, and a mix of angel investment money through Calculus Capital coming on a couple of years ago on the journey as well.
Sure. And then thinking back, I think you said the company's 9 years old. So thinking back when you started up all those years ago, 9 years ago, why did you go on your own? Why did you not go through another company? What's the attraction of being an entrepreneur in that sense?
A joy of self-harm and endless amounts of stress. My background professionally was I was a strategy consultant, and I sort of paid my dues and did the rounds at Capgemini, Deloitte, and then PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I was reasonably late, although not that old, to the entrepreneurship game. My first round of that was to be one of the first employees at someone else's startup. That we learned a lot and did a lot and raised a lot of money and made a lot of mistakes, and actually didn't really do that through the EIS route. Did that mostly kind of through a super angel, then straight into other types of money thereafter. From my perspective, when I went alone after that first initial experience, I wanted to learn and do a different pathway, right? So we bootstrapped for as long as we could, and then brought on a different type of money. I'd seen some of the pros and some of the cons of the approach we took before, and I regard a lot of the entrepreneurial journey as kind of a life MBA as well, right? You're constantly learning, constantly being challenged, and so not walking the path we'd already walked once. I wanted to explore a different route, learn that, and I provided a lot of that advice and guidance back to others now as to which direction you should take, how long to bootstrap for, what type of money to take, etc. Because I feel like I've walked in multiple pairs of shoes over recent years.
A cheaper but scarier MBA in that sense, by the sound of it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's cheaper or not, but yeah.
And George, again, do you want to just tell us a bit more about Aerocloud and kind of your journey towards where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Aerocloud, before we entered the market, was dominated. The market was dominated by lots of legacy competition. My co-founder and business partner, Ian Ford Smith, he had created one of these legacy competitors and sold it in 2011. So he knew really where the gaps were. And Ian invested in one of my first companies. And when we came to divvying up, amongst some Costa coffee, he said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, at the time I was still racing professionally, and I said I'd like to work for myself. It kind of wasn't an option for me not to work for myself. My parents have never had a typical job. My dad's a commercial property developer, now a retirement provider. My mum had a chain of hairdressers and also was one of the first shops of United Colours of Benetton in Wigan. And I've never really known a 9-to-5 culture really since growing up. And he said, "Well, what about coming and working for me?" I said, "No, I don't want to work. I want to go down the middle." So we went down the middle with Aerocloud, and in 2017, we went to a conference to address what problem we could solve. Typical lean startup, started to speak with as many airports as possible, using Ian's prior contacts and my naivety to ask, why is it you do it that way? Or what are you doing to solve those problems? And the answers were absolutely brilliant. They were really rubbish for the airport, but they were brilliant for us. And in sort of mid 2017, we were in an airport and we'd mapped out this crazy map of all these problems that we could solve. And I said to the airport director, I said, "If we can solve all of that, will you pay us?" And that's how Aerocloud was born. And since then, we had raised a funding round in August of last year, and we were 3 staff. We're a profitable business, and now we are 14. And spending as much of that money down the hockey curve as we possibly can to encroach on our competitors' lunch money and grow the business as big as we can. And now we are fighting those legacy providers. We're replacing them at some airports, most notably Tampa International in the US. And we're approaching about 3 airports a week at the moment and proposing about 6 airports a month. So we're on a very aggressive sales journey at the moment, and yeah, that's really exciting.
Just sounds like kind of proper disruption stuff. And how open to are big airports, big corporate airports, to a kind of small, lean startup like yourselves?
Really not very open at all. The first question you get asked is, "Well, where else are you in?" It's one of those sorts of industries. So the first customer was extremely hard to get. And then when we got Tampa International, that's when we started to walk with a bit of a swagger and start to open some doors. And the phone has just started to ring for us now. And a lot of the consultancies are now starting to get on board. And we are heavily investing in our marketing to try and educate airports about what we can achieve for them and how we're going to centralize their data for them and make it easy for them to make data-driven decision making. And now, actually, it's become a lot easier, but it really was very, very difficult at the start. And they're like the mafia, these 5 companies. So for us, I thrive in that environment. So does my business partner. And we absolutely love it. We're really having a great time and enjoying it. And you wouldn't necessarily think we would be in a climate as we are with airports sort of on their knees.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must be a difficult time for that particular industry as well. So it must be super resilient to stay in there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of funny as well, because we raised, our funding round in August, in the depth of it, really. And what was interesting is that airports really needed to save money. We're about 1/5 or worst case 1/3 of the cost of our competition. So for us, COVID gave us a real wind of opportunity. And as I'm sure in all of our businesses, the legacy customers have started or had to rethink the way they're doing things. And cloud is prevalent in most sectors, not in ours. So for us, COVID gave us a real wind, and in a way, we're grateful of the situation it's provided, not necessarily the pandemic side of it.
Yeah, I do think that's a common theme, though, that COVID has kind of created winners and losers. So we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit more in a minute. It's interesting to hear kind of Simon's and George's backgrounds, because they're very different. Simon sounded a bit more corporate. George sounded a bit more entrepreneurial, but I guess, Jasper, you've got a kind of different take on it from where you've been as well. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, from Vala's perspective, I mean, we're always just looking for, I think as any investor is, great teams in businesses that can scale. And, as an entrepreneur, I've spent many years sort of trudging the pavement, looking for money, knocking on the doors of VCs. And, I think when we exited our last business, it was a pretty good exit. And we, felt that actually it would be really interesting to set up a VC with a bunch of entrepreneurs that actually had been through that journey multiple times. And it's a journey, as Simon and George have said, it's a journey that's fraught with risk and emotional turmoil, and it can be really, really challenging. I mean, there are great opportunities that come through it as well, but it's quite often a lot bigger of a journey than you'd sort of set out or thought you were setting out on at the beginning. So being sensitive to that and understanding how that works, I think was a key part of setting up Vala, and the sort of the empathy that we give and offer to our entrepreneurs, I think is really powerful. And there's a good example. We have a business called Playworks, which is in the game space, and Playworks has, game space generally benefited significantly from the pandemic, because people were indoors more, playing more games. And so, like a lot of games industries or games businesses, its revenues climbed, well over 100%. So it was fantastic for it. Where a company like Playworks has been fascinating is that, the team is a really strong, really experienced veteran team in that industry. And they've built something very unique in that industry, which is franchises on TV networks and cable networks and things like that. So they sort of operate games a bit like a TV channel and lock in subscribers and customers. And I think that's a really interesting way of creating predictable growth and predictable scale in a market that generally is really fragmented and actually quite difficult to break into because of the complexity of the App Store model and the breakout HTML5 models and things like that. So looking at industries in a way, through a slightly different lens is something that we love to do. And, the games industry, top line, you can look at it and say it's got extraordinary scale, and a single app that cost you £50,000 could go to a couple of billion people. There are very few industries that have that. The reality is that almost no games that cost 50 grand get to anything like a billion people. And so whilst you can look at it at a top line and say there's great scale, actually you need to be extremely strategic on how you place your bets in that digital environment to have any chance of creating significant scale. So where Playworks was, I think, really clever was that it bundled games, it negotiated fixed distribution deals that run for many, many years, that give it captive audiences that it can then monetize. So it's created a sort of SaaS platform for games, which is, a really, novel model. And it's, to some degree, it's where Zynga and Activision and, where Fortnite obviously went with its game, with that title and stuff. So, really interesting business, great team. And it's sort of indicative of how we'll look at an industry, try and find a team that we really like, and then partner with them. And it's very much a venture building partnership rather than just acting as a straight VC.
Sure, and please don't mention Fortnite again. I'm sick of Fortnite. I've had about 3 months of it during lockdown. So,
are you good at it?
No, I don't bloody play it. It's my son who plays it.
That's what you're saying, right?
That's my story. I'm sticking to it, exactly.
Yeah.
And so Mark, just coming to you. Obviously, George has told us about the business and how it's worked and how it came to be. So, from your point of view, as the guy putting money into it or representing the firm that put money into it, why George? Why AeroCloud? There's hundreds and thousands of companies you could have invested in. What was the kind of key thing that drew you to George?
Oh. Well, let's take George out of the equation because he's going to get too much attention. But the same methodology applies to why we invested in AeroCloud and why we invest in. I think we have 17 investments in our portfolio. It's simple as there's two things. We look at the problem and then we look at the people. So we look at the problem and we look at the solution that group, that startup has got for that problem, and that problem is being solved by digital. All we invest in at Hatch is digital businesses. I know there's lots of different applications for EIS, but we focus on digital and how technology can solve. And that problem can be solved with just the simplicity of digital technology, simplicity of a process that's powered by IP, and it can also be a new technology that's born out of born out of the internet and newer technologies. So we've invested in AR companies, we've invested in enterprise B2B businesses that simplify the process. And in George's case, in Aerocloud's case, he summed it up perfectly. There's a more agile, there's a more effective way of solving the problems and providing solutions for airports that some of the incumbents aren't doing. And that leads actually nicely into the second part of what we look for in a startup. We really want to get to know the people. We want to understand what the founder's about, because we want to work really closely with them. We want to help them. We want to like them. We want to have fun with them. We want to build a relationship with them. So there's a number of different bits there. We sometimes like a really good mix of experience. Again, George summed that up. Ian had done this before, knew the industry back to front, and brought alongside him a CEO that had incredible partner skills, very inquisitive, very curious, and goes and knocks down doors and makes things happen. A brilliant partnership. In other businesses we work with, it's a couple of young founders that are passionate about solving a problem together and know each other intimately, and again, we just click with them. Sometimes it's a founder that's done it 2 or 3 or 4 times before, so they know how to create a team. They've got the team in the wings. They've got the experience, and they've maybe even made a good chunk of money, but they want to go and do it again. They've seen another opportunity, and that makes it really quite straightforward. And what we do when we meet that group is we challenge their thinking. We try and pull the model apart a bit, and what we're looking for there is just agility in their thinking. Can they handle? I mean, Simon and George and Jasper all kind of said the same thing. There's lots of ups and downs in terms of building a business. You don't always do a big pivot, but there's definitely things that didn't quite go to plan when you built their business model back in day one. So we want to work with people that have that flexibility of mindset, that are up for listening to us and working with us. Will come and shout if they want our perspective and advice, but also have got that ability to step back and say, well, maybe I need to approach this a different way. And the mixture of those two things. What's the problem and what's their solution, and then who are the people and whether we like the people. And between the 4 of us, we usually get a pretty good sense. And with George and Ian and Aerocloud, it was pretty straightforward. And they've had a good tailwind actually with the pandemic, which meant loads of airports have gone, actually, why am I spending all this money on something that isn't actually as good as what a startup like Aerocloud are providing? So, there's the pandemic, as you mentioned before, has been beneficial to a lot of businesses in the digital space.
Yeah, I won't be so rude to ask as whether all 4 of you were unanimous in saying that George should get investment, because that would probably be not.
Oh, we are on our investments. Yeah, we have to all be. If someone's got an issue, then there's usually something there that we dig into, and in all the cases, like we're only 20 investments in, so like maybe there'll be something in the future where one person is on the fence, but the other 3 are really supportive. But so far, yeah, it's been unanimous. There's a lot of opportunities out there. So there's some ones that just don't work out for whatever reason. One of us has just got something's not adding up, and we've been fortunate enough in the ones we've done that we do have a unanimous vote on it. Yeah.
Sure. And you mentioned business plans in there. I often think it'd be an interesting exercise to go back to a company's business plan on day one and see if in the year 5 how accurate or how close it was to that business. I suspect it would change immensely.
About the rigor of their thinking. It's like how they're approaching the opportunity. What's the market opportunity analysis? How they're going to go about doing it? What are their gates? What are their milestones? What's their org structure? You'd be amazed. You meet a startup. Who's on the team? Well, he's kind of half in. Is he really committed? You go and talk to that person. They're not. They've actually just signed a contract for another company or doing another job. And so when you kind of get into the DD, the business model and that first presentation really gives you a clarity on their their thinking and their approach to solving that problem, and like, so the business model and the business plan is really important in terms of getting an understanding of where they're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'll go to Alexander and ask perhaps not the same question, because Mark's answered that one so perfectly well. But in terms of kind of you as a VC, how hands-on are you with Simon? And then I'll go to Simon and ask how oh my God, how hands-on he wants you to be. But yeah, how hands-on are you?
I think we look to be pretty hands-on throughout the investment. We start off the investment with a sort of, we've spent 4 or 5 months getting to know you. Going back to the previous question, just the understanding, getting to know the team, which is critical to us. We do partly by having a fairly extended investment period, and that puts management teams under some pressure, and you see how they behave under pressure, and that's important. But post that, you've made the investment, the dance is finished, and there's an opportunity to sit down and really work together. How are we going to get to the end we're all looking for? So we take that as an important stage in the first 90 days post investment to work with them, probably some offsite sessions to build up a plan of how we're heading. Now, as I say, the dance is over, and then we'll look to refresh that on a regular basis. And then in the meantime, we're active on the board. We want to be part of the team building the company. We regard our role as to support, build the company, which is in the interests of the company and ultimately in interest of our investors when we get to an exit at the end.
And then, because I think you've invested a couple of times in Wazuku, is that right?
We have, yes.
Yeah. So when you come to do that second or follow-up investment, how easy is it then to say, yep, just kind of green light it and go through, or do you kind of start the process again almost and say?
Follow-ons are always difficult because you've got to start. There's an inherent bias. I like this company, and I want to carry on backing it. And so you need to be dispassionate about it and say, is this the right thing to be doing? Wazuku was a very easy investment to make. It was performing well. It had some great additional opportunities ahead of it that weren't apparent when we made our first investment, and so we were comfortable about making a follow-on investment into it. But it absolutely has to be made with the same rigor that the first investment is made in.
Sure. And then Simon, it's interesting to ask you, how hands-on do you want your VC to be? You know, do they ring it up saying, "Oh God, it's the bloody VC again. Just give us the money and piss off"? How supportive do you want them to be? Basically, what's the balance, I guess?
So I think there's two perspectives that I take on it, right? One is, and I think that dance that Alexander talked about is a really important one at the front end, right? You've got to know that your values, your perspectives, and your working relationships are going to be aligned and function well together, right? Because from my perspective, the hierarchical teams in your business are nowhere near as important as the two core teams, which is your board has to be a really strong team and your exec management team has to be a really strong team, right? And that's where your superpower lies. If you can, and where you've got dysfunction is where problems occur, right? So for me, it's calculus as an investor is calculus as a board member, right? And making sure that they are a value add lens and challenger and representative of the shareholders, sure, but also really kind of pushing the business in the right direction. And the plans that Alexander said, in the first 90 days we sat down and we'd agreed to a number of things as part of the investment. Some of those things have taken us some time to evolve and realize, and there's been patience there and real collaboration to do it. But also one of the big strategies we put together in our first 90 days was really transformed by an opportunity that we had that led to us acquiring the assets of a competitor in our space that was not on our plan. In fact, probably the opposite was in our plan. And so being flexible and willing to work to things that present themselves that are a business opportunity, quite complicated, especially given the nature of EIS money and other things as well, and finding creative solutions to allow us to maximize potential shareholder returns in the future and the direction we want to go for the business is exactly where I want my investors, my board to be. And I think it's a mix of hands-on when appropriate and also trusting the other team, the delivery team in the business to be open, transparent, and get on and do the job as well. So I think it's a big trust-based thing.
So they do say like a VC and investee company relationship is a little bit like a marriage. So is it akin to that?
Who's husband and who's wife then, Alexander? I don't know. Yeah, look, I think it's another relationship. It's an important one. We speak openly, we speak honestly. It's certainly been more testing in the last 12 months or so, because we're not able to meet up face to face, and I think you do lose quite a bit of that from a board investor perspective when you can't just dip into the office or experience the team firsthand, because you're not in the business 24/7, right? You're seeing it episodically, and the pace that scale up businesses move at 30 or 60 or 90 days is a lifetime, right? And so communication and relationship are absolutely critical, because the world can turn upside down, as we've seen in 12 months in any of these businesses, positively or negatively in 90 days, and things are changing so dramatically that line of communication is absolutely critical.
So you're just trying to align those interests between obviously what the VC is looking for and what you're looking for. Is I guess an early important conversation as well. That's ultra critical to what happens next.
Yeah, it like I said, it's got to be that team is as important as any other team, right? And that line of communication is as important as any.
Sure. And then Jasper, just trying to kind of bring that on a little bit in terms of aligning investors' interests with the company and the VC. That's kind of another element to add in as well. How do you go about managing that one? You're on mute, Jasper. First time today. Brilliant. You get the award.
Thanks. Well, you'll send it later, will you?
Yeah.
The rosette.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Big sticker on your head saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. I think it's a fascinating question. Is how do you align everybody's interests around a company? And now we've had, experiences. I've had as an entrepreneur experiences where we had very large multinational corporate investors who were a complete pain in the ass. Who willfully tried to destroy the business rather than help it grow, and then they bought it at a significant discount. So there are all sorts of strings that people are trying to pull. I mean, I think as an investor, you obviously want to be aligned significantly with the management team and with the company and the company's goals, and trying to ensure that there's a happy family. But that's not all. Life's not always happy. Things do go wrong. We've not under Vala, but I've had a business where a CEO tragically died. And that changes the dynamic of that business and that team and things like that. And so what we tend to do is, we do, I think, what everybody else does, which is, we do our DD, we do the dance, we generally act as a lead, we go in as a part of the team, often quite a central part of the team, because we provide lots of value add services. So we have a technology team that we provide, we have a Marcoms team that we provide, a branding team that we provide. So for companies that want that type of sort of hand-holding, we provide that as well. But fundamentally, we structure our investments on the basis that if the family isn't happy for whatever reason, we've got our interests are as protected as possible. And I think that sounds a really negative way of actually approaching a relationship. It's not. It generally means that every shareholder's interest, whether they're coming through us or outside of Vala's network, are aligned. But what it does mean is that there are mechanisms to protect the business in the event of some form of catastrophic event. Sure. And that's played out fantastically well for us across the pandemic. And so if you look at the beginning of the pandemic, you had complete chaos and we were all terrified and no one really knew how to react. No one knew what sources of capital were going to be available. Lots of EIS rounds in particular failed because it coincided with the end of the tax year. The government hadn't yet announced any of its support schemes and things. And so there was an awful lot of entrepreneurs just going, well, how do I behave? And so we, first off, put in place a behavioral science program that helped all those people sort of understand the psychology of stress and what was going on, and help them react to the emotional issue. And then secondly, put in place funding systems that sort of, bolstered the businesses that were completely freaking out. And that sort of step-in approach has been really valuable for us. And, we've had, like everybody, winners and losers in the pandemic. But I'm really proud of what Vala's achieved, because it's basically underpinned every business really, really, really well. The ones that could grow have grown fantastically well. The ones that have, couldn't sell what they had are still there, and they're in the recovery process. We had one business which makes biscuits, and they couldn't get the ingredients to make the biscuits. And we love businesses that make things, right? But for a business like that, traditional manufacturing businesses, it was a challenge,
Yeah.
But then, Warburton's invested in the company and helped it grow, and now that business is thriving. So,
Sure.
Really interesting set of dynamics I think we've all had to manage over the last year. And fundamentally, it's about alignment of interest. But at the end of the day, we're representing other people's money, and it's our responsibility to make sure that when it doesn't go as well as planned, we've got mechanisms to protect ourselves.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good example of how, as a previous entrepreneur, you're able to help another entrepreneur by being a VC at the same time. It's probably a good point to bring in Mark as well, because I know at Hatch, all four of you guys are entrepreneurs. So how important is it to be entrepreneurial yourself if you're running a VC portfolio?
From our perspective, pretty, because we make a big USP play of that we've had some experiences, we've had some successes, we've had some we've had the hard experiences as well of doing a startup, so that helps us make a connection. And that means we've got a mindset of taking a risk, we've got a mindset of seeing an opportunity, we react well to the passion and the confidence of somebody like a George and an Ian that want to challenge a norm and disrupt and compete. And as Simon mentioned, sometimes it isn't about headwinds, it's about things are happening much quicker than you intended them to happen. Or an opportunity comes on that I can buy another business and I can kind of move fast into this space. So I think having people that can relate as a human being to, like, this can be pretty lonely and this can be pretty tough, and there's bits of this that we're always all learning as individuals, I think helps create that mentorship. And obviously from building a business and scaling a business and then selling a business, there's direct benefits that if you work with investors that have done that before, because they can relate to it and they can give you really direct advice. On the question you asked Jasper about investors, I think it's quite an interesting question. We actually don't take into account what our investors want to do when we're making investment. We say, look, we're going to aim for a 10 times return. We're going to invest in digital businesses. This is our IM. This is the fund, and then we go and make those decisions. We rarely take into account an individual or a family fund's perspective. We expect them to trust us to make the decision. What we do sometimes is, within our community of investors, there's a lot of people that are successful entrepreneurs. Some of them in gaming, to Jasper's example earlier on. Some of them in very different industries. There's one person in our group in the hospitality industry that we've gone to a couple of times around digital food tech businesses. There's another one that's in insurance. We've gone around insurtech. So sometimes we will go in, like, bounce an opportunity just to say, look, you're kind of a specialist in this area. We'd love to get your perspective on it. So we do that now and again, where we reach out to, whether they're investors or people in our network, but we don't tend to factor in. I mean, this isn't a democracy. We're not getting lots of people to vote, should we make this investment? But I thought it was quite an interesting question.
Right, yeah, I guess you run a discretionary managed portfolio, so therefore it's in your discretion as to how you manage that portfolio, and that's no different from, an ISA fund or a pension fund or whatever else. So I guess one of I get what can be one of the specialities of EIS and SEIs, as an investor, you get a bit more of a say potentially in the running of that business, whether that's through a fund or for a direct company. Talking of EIS funding, George, I wanted to pick up with you. I'm a bit worried about you. I think you're going to get a car parking ticket or something in a minute, but if you need to move on, let me know.
No,
why did you take EIS funding? Why not debt? Why not corporate funding? Why not angel non-EIS money? What was the attraction of kind of EIS funding?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think, if I'm really honest, I don't think we had access to debt at the time. I think there's the specific bits that you have to have in place to take on
revenue mainly.
Debt. Yeah, good debt was difficult for us in August. I think what attracted me, if I can go back, whether we took EIS, SEIS, or VC money, or any combination, which we did, we took a combination, was about the opportunity from the people who it was coming from. So as Mark mentioned, Mark sits as a board observer, and I inform all my investors all of the time of what we're doing via WhatsApp. And yeah, I suppose I can't really answer that question directly, but I look for the people that I want to work with. I think
you did answer it by saying that it wasn't necessarily what the money was; it was more who it's coming from. Sounds like
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there are lots of opportunities with the SEIS and EIS funding that presented themselves to us, and specifically the ones with Hatch. They're northern, if Lincoln can be considered northern. There was a match there.
Lincoln stretching it with Stamford, southern Lincolnshire.
So yeah, I have to answer that question honestly. There was no we've got to go for this.
North is north of the Watford Gap, isn't it? So it's just about qualifying.
Yeah, to a lot of you boys, it is. Yeah, it's a USP for Aerocloud, I always say. But.
And so then when you go on to next funding and obviously kind of graduate on from EIS and go to Series A and institutional, again, will Hatch be on that journey with you? Will they kind of still be a partner in that sense?
Well, I hope so. That's probably a question for Mark. I have had confirmation from some of my vendors that they intend to carry on, which I think is very important. They've obviously got to know me and Ian and the other 12 guys intimately. We have a monthly call where we invite all the investors on to meet the new members of the team. And I would really hope that would be a good indicator for whoever comes on board next to say, oh, well, these guys that were here at Seed are going to carry on. And I think that's testament to both parties, not just the investor, but also the business and what the business has achieved, but also the people there as part of that journey. For us, we will look to raise again for sure if we hit our targets. We're just ahead of on track at the moment. But I think one important thing I would like to get into is just I picked up from some of the other questions is that as on the other side of the fence of the recipient of the money, it's very important, to like the person who you're taking the money from, but you've also got to appreciate that everyone's nice at the start. And we talked about this marriage, right? And you've got to try and have some future looking and look into the future about how these people are going to be if the tide turns, right? And as we know, the journey is up and down, and we've mentioned that before. But what are these people going to be down like when you're a bit down or when you're a bit on your knees? And the idea of Seed for me and Ian was to pick partners that not just had a checkbook that we needed, but had the ability to be with us for a long time and be with us until the end, whatever that end looks like for Aerocloud. And I think that's single for me, probably one of the most important things. And one of the great stories I'd say about Hatch is we had an investor from up north actually drop out on the day of signing, and we had a £250,000 hole in our round, right? And given that, without sounding very overconfident, Aerocloud got 2 lead offers. We were done in a very short space of time, had an incredibly lucky funding journey, and this happened right on the last day. And I called Fred with this problem, and Fred spoke with Mark and Scott, and basically said, yeah, we're good for it on that day. And that's the sort of partner that I want. And I would desperately hope, Mark, that you'll be there for the next round. Judging by his face, I hope that's a yes. Well, it's an hour on record. So we'll see. But it's people. We're in a business that requires good personalities and strong relationships, I think.
Sure. If you need a recording of this to play back at some point in the future, then just let me know. I'll play it back.
Exactly, his leverage. I've got him.
Exactly. Alexander, I'll ask a kind of similar question for you and Simon. When they go on and raise their next funding rounds, how instrumental are you in helping them to make introductions to kind of bigger VCs or institutions? How does that work? And also, for your EIS investors, how do you make sure they're not diluted away completely once Wazuku goes on to be a big, massive billionaire unicorn?
So coming to that last question, the key to that is to build a strong, successful company, so that the value has been more than the capital you've put in, and you've created something that is worth more, and is worth more to a multitude of people who will make sure that the next step is right. When it comes to either exit or the next round of funding for all of our portfolio companies, there's a whole range of options on the table. We've got to be ready for any of them, if not prepared for all of them. And so we are working with companies. We've recently done a successful IPO of a SaaS company with a 6x return to investors. We look at strategic exits. We look at private equity exits, and or even private equity further support with us remaining as an investor. And it's the important thing is to make sure that what works for our investors is aligned with what works for the company. And if you've built a strong company, there is good opportunity for that to happen.
Sure. And Simon, going the other way again, once you go on to that bigger fundraising and kind of graduate from Calculus in that sense, how important are they going to be in making those introductions to kind of bigger VCs or those institutions that we talked about?
So I think I'd say a couple of things. One is that the relationship we had has been very transparent since day one, right? We knew who we were bringing in, what the expectations were of the investors that we were bringing in at that stage, and what our commitments were on either side of that relationship, right? And one of the things about EIS is, and I know it's a constantly moving beast, is it has a life cycle, right? It currently can tap out at a certain level, which probably will only take you so far. It has restrictions around what you can do with it that may or may not work for businesses at different stages of their evolution. And for me, that was part of the attraction in some ways for us at the size and type of business that we were and are building, right? So I think it has a point in its journey, which doesn't mean it can't stay with you throughout, but it's, you know, depending on which direction the business goes from here on out. And I do believe there is a very significantly sized business that we can build here as well. How we'll see how far we can take that, but Calculus, I'd love to have them along for the journey. The reality is that may or may not happen. I'd love for them to add loads of value when we get to that next stage. That may or may not happen, but we've gone into it very eyes open, and it is a very strong working relationship, right? So we've had those discussions almost since day one, and they were a part of the strategic conversation even before signing term sheets. And I think that is critical. And I do believe that, the fundamental to most of the stuff that I've seen with Calculus is that core strong teams build credible businesses that deliver, that are good businesses, right? And that was the thing that I always looked at, was we never went into this saying we want to do C, D, E, F and endless numbers of rounds either, right? It was, let's go build a credible business. If that justifies a business case for more money in the future, then fine. If we can do it organically, even better, right? It's not going to dilute down founders. It's not going to dilute down anybody. This isn't an endless chase for further money, and nor does it have to be, right? I think that's the other piece of it. That doesn't mean we won't announce a big fundraiser in the future. It just doesn't mean that we will either.
Sure, it's been interesting across all of you. Actually, there's been a common theme here. I thought there'd be more emphasis on kind of the funding and the money just coming in and you spending it basically, but no, it's been much more about the relationship and how you work with the VC and how the VC works with the company. And I guess that's the kind of a unique feature of EIS and SEIS and venture capital that you don't get with pensions and ISAs and even private equity, quite frankly. That is what you get when you get money with EIS. It's not just that funding; it is also the support. They have contact books, all those great things that go along with it as well. Jasper, I'm going to tread carefully on my next question. So I want to talk about exits and timing. So again, when you speak to an investee company, perhaps for the first time, or you're going to take them on board and put some money into them, what sort of conversations do you have up front about where you expect them to get to, when, and quite frankly, when you want your money back and your investors' money back?
I think, to Simon and Alexander's point, we focus on, first and foremost, just trying to build great businesses, and businesses pivot and change and things. So when you look at the model, you might be really excited on day one. Alexander was talking about 90 days in. 90 days in, it may be slightly different. And so what we tend to do is have a pretty well-defined exit map based on our day one assumptions. I don't think we've been in a business where those day one assumptions are the same at exit. So there's lots of variables there. But what we'll tend to do is look at how that exit map looks. So, for instance, I'll take this little biscuit company, which is called the Artful Baker, which is a small manufacturing business. Manufacturing is a space that we really like. We think it's really resilient. We think there's lots of new tech coming into smart manufacturing and things like that. We love businesses that make things. So we've got a blend of tech and physical product. But if you take that business, the original assumptions on exit were that it would get sort of a 5x return or something like that. When Warburton's came in, they sort of underpinned a valuation at that sort of level. And so it validated all the original assumptions that we made. We haven't exited it completely, but I think it's a good example of a business where, we had a map that was verified by an external investor who's taken a very significant stake in the business, and we've got options to exit out the back of it. And as another example, we invested in a business many years ago, which was in the game space called Hutch. And Hutch made all the Formula One games. And so we sold Hutch for, with the earnout, about $475 million. And, so you'd never really predict that when we put the money in. That's a 90 plus X return for us. So you wouldn't, you'd never model that, and it's come about because they had a glorious time during the pandemic, and Liberty took over F1 and drove it to a different level and wanted more interactivity and all that sort of stuff. So there are these sort of black swan events, if you like, that happen, that change the quantum, and you can't invest on that basis. You have to invest on a steady state DCF. What do we think the multiple will be at the end of the term? We have an advisory business that builds relationships with strategic corporate venture partners, other VCs, angel networks, and things like that. So we tend to start mapping the exit from our perspective as soon as we can after we go in. It's not always successful, but it enables us to build, quite a good sort of Rolodex of opportunities for those companies. But most of the exits are generated by the company and the management team rather than by us. But we're a wrapper around that.
Yeah, that's interesting because Mark, if an offer comes in for Aerocloud from, I don't know who would buy Aerocloud, I'm sure George would tell me, but if an offer came in for Aerocloud and you thought, yeah, that's a good offer, do you then go back to George and say, look, sell up, or do you have a conversation about it, or how does it work? How does the process work from that point?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have an offer, you have to have a chat about it. Those things happen, they come along, you sit down and have a conversation and work out whether it's the right price at the right time, whether that company can help take it on to the next level, what the deal looks like. I mean, personally, I think it matters at the beginning, like to get an idea of where the investor is trying to go to. So where do you see the exit of this business? Where do you see this going over the next 5 to 10 years? What are the routes in terms of the business you want to create, the problem you're trying to solve? Where do you think that resonating in terms of a future owner? I think that's helpful early on. Then to Jasper's point, you kind of forget about it for a year or two and just get on with building the business. And then something happens, whether it's the Hutch example or things go faster than you planned, and then you sit down. We've got that with a couple of businesses in the portfolio now, where people have surprised us and come along, start knocking on the door because they like what they see, and hopefully that will happen with George at some point. But George and Ian, know the market opportunity. They know how much potential's out there, and having that framework, having that perspective on where this can go, helps you have a good perspective on whether to say no or whether to say actually that's the right timing. So that's when it starts to get really fun. And we're doing this to make a return for investors, and that's why EIS is so amazing. It's very tax efficient from the beginning to the end, and we're all in this to try and make a great return for our investors.
Absolutely, that's what it's all about, I guess. We've got about,
And our startups, George included.
of course, we can all agree on that one. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to leave the last word to Simon and George as the entrepreneurs in residence, as it were. I just wanted to ask, what kind of excites you about 2021, and how's the future looking? What future prospects do you see for Aerocloud and Wazooku? Simon, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think, as we said earlier, there were winners and losers, I think, in the last 12 months. Enterprise software and probably B2B SaaS generally mostly did quite well, right? We had a lull for a little while just because everyone was catching their breath of what they needed to do just to keep the lights on in many of our clients. But actually the green shoots for me are really exciting. You know, the support we had to do an acquisition or buy the assets of a business in the middle of a global pandemic actually was the perfect time to do it for many reasons, because it means that as the market's coming back again, we're really well set up with a much more compelling proposition than even the one we had before. So I'm really excited. You know, there's also a lot of good talent out there right now. So we've added some great people to the business. The market that we serve needed a kind of big paradigm shift in some ways, and I think this moved it closer to us as well. And George probably said will say a similar thing. So yeah, I think the future's bright. And that topic of exits is, it's also a very frothy, hot market at the moment, right? One of the things we're looking at is, if you're on a 3 to 5 year window, what might it look like in 3 to 5 years, and how much should you be thinking about now or beyond that period of time, because it's all cyclical, right? And so you've got to be aware of that bigger macro and think about it.
Yeah, M&A activities are really hot at the moment, isn't it? There's lots going on in that space. George, how about you? How's 2021 looking for you guys?
Yeah, so I've got 1/3 of my eye on the future and trying to be the best value add CEO I possibly can at Aerocloud. But 2020, the rest of this year and into the early part of next year just looks like Aerocloud's team just doing a bit of grind and a bit of graft, doing a lot more of the same thing. My job specifically is going into each vertical and making sure that I've got the best tools that I can give the guys to do the best job, and just working really, really hard in the grind phase. And then as I come out towards the end of next summer, I can start to talk about those exciting things that you guys refer to about potentially acquiring some smaller businesses and bolting them onto Aerocloud, or potentially looking at the next journey of where we play our next data stream or something like this. But for now, it looks very much the same day in, day out. It's what we say up north is a bit of grind. And I'm just going to try and give my guys the best tools that they possibly can, really. And I've got the advantage of a bit of not so grey hair at Mark, but some experience on my board that can keep me on track. I'm quite a young and naive CEO, which sometimes is a benefit, and sometimes I need to take some hefty advice and keep on the right track, really. So I'm just looking to do the best job I can right now, and continue this excitement that the whole team has got, and the trajectory we're on. We should 3, if not 4 times our revenue this year. I'm really excited about building a great business with, more importantly, some great people as well.
Brilliant. There's a lot of grey hair in VC, so you're not that short of advice from grey hair in VC world. Don't worry.
Well, funny enough, since August, my hair's started to get greyer, and if I hadn't had a shave this morning, you'd see that I've got grey beard coming on, which Mark and Chris and Ian teased me in the board meeting. We had one last week actually, and they were taking the Mickey. So yeah, it's still long days ahead for us. My day sort of starts with looking at Asia in the morning, running our now European business with a guy who's leading it from Denmark, and then my calls are sort of stopping at 10:30. So for me, never thought I'd say it. I really do look forward to the weekend sometimes, whilst trying to maintain the energy that I try and get everybody going as well. So yeah, I'm sorry, not much more of a complex answer, but just doing more of the grind.
It's a good insight into the day in the life of a CEO of a startup. So yeah, your hours there, how much
calls from the car.
Yeah, how much passion you put into it, it all comes across loud and clear.
On the fly, so yeah, Thank you very much, though, for having us. It's been a
Also,
good chat. And,
congrats on the northern representation on this call. I'm impressed.
Yeah, there we go.
Two Mancunians. I'm
There
impressed.
we go.
Good work.
That's it. That's it.
Great.
You lot have had it very good for a long time. It's now Manchester's turn. So yeah, we're looking forward to seeing what good companies, what great companies come out of Manchester.
Yeah, we've done well on locations. We've done less well on diversity in terms of sexual and ethnic diversity, but we'll have to cover that one another
Yeah,
one.
that should be a question.
11.
How many Northerners have you got in your team? That should be a question now.
I might put that on the
Southern
next
guys.
one. Might put that on the next one. Jasper, we've got about a minute left, so just in a minute, do you want to give a kind of update as to how you see 2021 going?
Well, I think it's
I'm going to cut you off after a minute, by the way.
okay. Yeah, I think from an investor perspective, it's a great time to be in small SME companies. I think they've had a fair chunk of government support. I think there's a lot of energy pent up. There's a lot of investors looking to sort of try and grow their capital, and I think the entrepreneurial network in the UK is second to none. And we've got the ability, if we work cohesively and well together, to create a real powerhouse in Europe. And I'm full of excitement for it. So it doesn't take a minute. I think I think we've got a fantastic 12 months ahead of us, and hopefully a lot longer than that.
John, I think that's a valedictory way to end. So thank you very much for that. So thank you very much to all our panelists today. As I say, you can pick up all these recordings on the website from all 5 days. That is it now. Our week is done. So you'll be glad to hear, I'm sure. Please do remember, if you're an IFA financial planner, free membership is available on our website. Can have a look at that. We'll be doing more of these events. Hopefully, please God, physical events where we can also actually meet and talk and have a drink and all those good things. Certainly look out for one we're doing in December at the QE2 Centre and Conference Centre in London. That'll hopefully be our flagship one for the year. But just need to say thank you very much to all our panelists. So thank you to George, Alexander, Simon, Jasper and Mark. Have a great weekend. See you all.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.